I invited Britta onto the podcast because she's going to be hosting some of our future WiSEAN podcasts. I think Britta's going to be bringing something new to the podcast because she's got a totally different background to me. She's used a biopsychosocial approach to her research on pain management among women ultra-endurance athletes. Britta tells me about the research she's done for her PhD, which was on pain management, so reflective practices, cognitive strategies for ultra-endurance and endurance women athletes, and hopefully the work that's going to be published from her PhD. She's also worked as an applied practitioner doing sports massage, and she lives in France, so I think she'll be bringing some unique aspects to this podcast. So Britta, welcome to the podcast. Now, I've invited you onto this podcast because you're going to be helping me host some podcasts, and because you've got a different background to me, so maybe more of a psychosocial approach to your research and your work. Can you say a little bit more about who we could be looking forward to as guests on the WiSEAN podcast?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited to be joining as a podcast host. And it's great to sort of be bringing together the research and applied practitioner stuff that I've got. So my background is in psychology, as you say. And so I'd love to be bridging the research and practice for female athletes, but particularly within ultra endurance, for example, or endurance, but also from an interdisciplinary background as well. So because I took a biopsychosocial lens, and so I'm looking at trying to get sociologists, psychologists and physiologists together around a different topic so we can kind of discuss all the latest research and the projects that are happening around there as well, just to kind of see what's really going on out there.
And you said you reached out to a couple of people. You mentioned some names. Anybody we might know?
So general pain is Anka Samulowitz, gender norms and pain. There's also Adele Pavlidis and Simone Fullaga who have done some work together regarding pain, particularly in roller derby, but there's various other projects. And Holly Thorpe as well, who's an esteemed sociologist as well, who has been doing a range of different projects with global impact, as well as sport related, exercise related as well. So I'm really excited to having a chat with them and sharing all their projects and conclusions, etc., and recommendations.
Yeah, those all sound fantastic. And you mentioned just before we started recording, actually, that you had a couple of papers that you were trying to get submitted. Were these from your PhD work that you'd done?
Yes, and so study one is currently under review still, hopefully getting published soon. As you know, the process takes a little while with the review process. And then just in the process of getting study 2 and 3 together for submission as well as sharing that and disseminating it, hopefully in a couple of conferences this year as well. So really excited about that.
And can you explain what those studies were? Because I'm not too sure. I know you did your PhD on reflective practices and cognitive approaches towards handling pain management in ultra endurance athletes. What were those particular studies on?
So I examined how female ultra endurance athletes experience and manage pain using 3 different time lenses. So looking back, tracking in real time, and then also following them over an entire season. So sort of retrospective, longitudinal, and naturalistic real time. And that was all using a biopsychosocial lens and theoretical framework. And the study 2 and 3 involved more monitoring and looking at their pain, but either at events and field work as well. And so that was a really exciting part of it, and that was the part that I really enjoyed, going and seeing and meeting the different athletes whilst they were taking part in their ultra events as well. And then so for the first study, that was 13 different athletes from different backgrounds. The second looking at 3 professional athletes, and then the 5, it was a mix really of different events, so it was according to their choice. And with the The conclusions, because it was biopsychosocial, it was really interesting to see the different factors, as well as the environmental factors that influence their pain tolerance and their cognitive strategies, and how experience helped them to decide, how they dealt with it, how they perceived whether it was race related, normal training pain, or if it was injury related. And also what was interesting was when the pain tolerance was high, whether that was relating to their well-being, if it was tied in with those or different aspects that had happened in their past as well.
And has this research and the results that you got enabled you to use the data or use your findings in your applied practice? Because don't you also, as another job, work with endurance athletes anyway?
At the moment, I've taken a little break just to be concentrating on doing all of the study work. But yeah, so my plan is to hopefully work with some professional cyclists and other athletes, triathletes, and to help monitor as part of an interdisciplinary team, just to sort of look at their monitoring and well-being, physical and mental well-being, really overall, in terms of doing their athletic performance pursuits. I think looking at mood, anxiety, as well as rest and recovery are really important factors, and also looking at their sleep as well.
And was there anything particular from the research that you did that was focused on women? Was it just women that you did the research on?
Yeah, it was only women, because at the time when I started, there was a lack of research, as we know, which is why we have this network with women generally in research, but also in general pain research and ultra endurance particularly, which is my passion basically in sport. And so that's why I wanted to bridge that gap. So all of them are women, and the different sort of demographics. I mean, some were professional, some were elite, amateur, but others were, just doing it because they wanted to get fit after post pregnancy, having kids, etc. And so all of them had different stories and different reasons for taking up and continuing on and doing that. It was a really insightful element in terms of, for example, if you're a mother and having had a child, some use that as their reference point for pain, and whereas others who hadn't had different stories or different levels of pain stories to sort of suggest how they would perceive pain, whether it's exercise related. So you can't always reference having had a child as the pinnacle, whereas others might have had, I think like one was kidney stones, for example, and that was worse. Or certain injuries, back injury, a breaking, in the vertebrae, for example. And so that was unique for females, because not all women have children, and so that you can't always suggest that that's the pinnacle of pain. And even if you have had a child, there may be other examples where that would make a difference. And I think as well, from a unique point of view with females, is the psychosocial cultural element, where mom guilt was something that came through, and the support from significant others to be able to go out and do that, and whether or not they had that support, or it was important for a lot of people, and not feeling guilty that they're going off. Because obviously with ultra endurance, you have to go off to do something like that. You need to be away for a long time. So you need someone to look after the children and not being judged. So these were unique elements. And then the other element was from a physiological point of view. So a lot of the pain research has been generally on male participants, so you can't really generalize with that. So hopefully the work that I've got is going to help bridge those gaps. And also there's recommendations in terms of well-being and for working with governing bodies, policies and things like that, as well as future research directions as well.
I so don't know anything really about pain, so this is really interesting to me. So sorry if my questions are really stupid here, but is there anything that would make you particularly good at handling pain or better than somebody else?
I think that's really, really interesting question, because it's a very individual element, I think, in that it's how you frame pain and how experienced you are to the different types of pain, and knowing your body, how self-aware you are, and the experience. If you've had lots of different experiences and you recognize and you think, well, okay, I know this pain. I know I can deal with this. But for some, it's the not knowing what it is. So if you know what the cause is, you can kind of maybe deal with it. And then also for some, there may be elements where if their background, if they've had trauma in the background, that helps in terms of their pain tolerance as well. Or if it's just part of their job, so it's they have to do that because that's what's expected of them, but it's contextualized to an event as well. Or if it's from the amateur point of view, for some it's the motivation to keep going, or for some it was the support around and they felt that they needed to get round. So there's a whole range of different factors that would actually help their pain tolerance. But there are also other factors that, even if their default is normally to ignore the pain, or they've dealt with it, they're not infallible to that. And there may be times where it could be to do with the terrain, the weather, mood, anxiety, what's happening in the background, lack of support. There's a whole range of different sort of biopsychosocial factors that could also affect that pain tolerance that they would normally have as they would perceive as high. But there is also a point where they sort of think, do you know what? I think this isn't a good one, and I'm probably ought to take a break or stop at this point. But usually the planning beforehand. So if it's gastrointestinal, GI issues, they can plan for that beforehand, hopefully. If they know they're going to get a blister or chafing, they'll try and plan for that as well. But this all comes with experience. And also I found it's very specific to the type of activity. So you've got running, cycling, swimming, a whole range of different things, really. So it's very, very much relating to that sport. So somebody might be really good on the bike, but not necessarily running or swimming, for example. And it's very contextualized to that. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, it's some of that really resonated, in the fact that if you'd experienced that in the past, pain in the past, then you know that your body can deal with that. When there's a new pain and you think, what is that? That's the thing that you might slightly freak out about, and therefore not be able to endure as much. But, if you had this scenario where somebody had a lot of pain in the past and they knew how to deal it, they prepared it, it was all going well for them environmentally, socially, everything. Does there come a point where pain is really an indicator that your body needs to stop? Could there be a situation where you've managed people so much to deal with their pain and they're doing it beautifully that they're missing the signs, and therefore they get really ill or really injured because they're not listening to those symptoms and the signs that their body's giving them to stop doing the exercise?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing for them, and that's where it is very individual. In that having high pain tolerance can be good, but it could be bad, because you're perhaps overriding like you say, the body's messages. And I think that's where pain education and knowing the difference, and not then perhaps adhering to like what maybe the sport ethic where you have to go through no pain, no gain, that type of thing. And you have to think about self-preservation versus self-harm, indicators potentially. And I think that's where when the more experienced people will know this, but then people who are perhaps just starting out, and I think that's where those indicators, they really ought to find that out. And the difference between, for example, stress fractures and entering a competition and going through and ignoring it could have detrimental effects. And I think that's something that some of the athletes had learned from making that mistake and realizing that perhaps they were overtraining. They should have listened to their body. And this is where sometimes it might have been linked with for their well-being, where this need to exercise every day. The thing that they loved and they wanted to do every day was actually the thing that they weren't going to be able to do if they didn't listen to their body. So it's kind of, it's getting that balance right. So for sure.
And what's on the horizon for you? So when you've submitted these studies? Are you looking to do some more research in this area? What's your ideal career pathway, your research pathway?
Well, I would love to be working within an interdisciplinary research team, looking at biomarkers as well as the psychological, sociological elements to it as well. So that would be an amazing sort of dream if I can just sort of do some work in the field as well as working with the team, writing up and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'd love to be doing that, be out and about in the mountains or elsewhere, collecting the data. So yeah, I would love to be doing that.
I should have asked you what got you into doing this, because you have done soft tissue therapy in the past and you've worked with endurance athletes. Was this what triggered you to do your PhD in this area?
Yeah, so my background's in sports science, and like I say, I've always had a passion for psychology. And with the anatomy side, I was doing, sports massage. So all of the different subjects have really been a passion of mine. But yeah, in terms of endurance stuff, I actually started doing triathlon when I was, I think, probably about 8 or 9. Obviously, small distances, and then took it back up when I moved down to Bristol. And then all the different distances got longer and longer. And, I think it's part of a lifestyle when you're doing this, when you're doing endurance and ultra endurance. It's the freedom that you have being able to go out, but also the discipline within what you're doing and managing it all. So yeah, I think pretty much that's how I got into it. But I was really fascinated with how people, like at the time when I was looking at it, people like Chrissy Wellington, who was a pro triathlete, and she won it for the first time. She was kind of like a rookie wild card. And it's what fascinated me was, how do you manage that kind of pain going? Because it's such a hard thing. And just marathon running, even, I used to say to some of my students, if you run as fast as you can and then keep that going for 2 hours, that's pretty much what these people are doing. And it's how you manage that. And so I thought, well, why don't I study it? But also I did find it was there was a research gap. So obviously it came from doing, a systematic sort of review of looking at all of the research. I'm obviously really keen to get women into sport and exercise anyway. So yeah, I think it helps when you're doing a PhD. You've got to be very passionate about the subject area. And obviously I've got a vested interest in doing ultra stuff myself, ultra cycling and triathlon, that sort of thing. So yeah,
and
quite a long-winded answer there.
Yeah, that was good. And you mentioned women in sport and exercise. You found out quite a long time ago about WiSEAN, actually, and you've been involved, haven't you? You've done some presentations at the conference. Is that right?
Yes. So my first interaction was I did a poster and presentation at St Mary's in 2019. And I was helping and volunteering back then. So it seems a long time ago now. And then also 2020, when there was the lockdown. And so I did a couple of presentations then as well. So yeah, so I've had a taste of working and looking at the WiSEAN network as well. And then some of those abstracts have been in print as well. So yeah. I've been inspired for a long time already.
Fantastic. And finally, you live in France. Can you give us a little bit of a picture of, well, I really just want to know what your local environment is like, but also what opportunities there are for the work that you do based in France?
Well, where I'm positioned, it's about 3-4 hours away from the Pyrenees, which is perfect for cycling, ultra trail, skiing, snowboarding, all sorts of activities, really, ski walking, and so as often as I'm able to, I'll go out and go to do stuff for myself, as well as go to different events. I also take part in, I guess, what you call circuit racing. It's national, sort of departmental, regional, national stuff. Not obviously at a professional level, but amateur. So that's another kind of a hobby of mine as well, doing the sort of short. It's a bit different to the ultra cycling, because obviously it's a different energy system, because you're going a lot faster around in a peloton. But it's really good experience from that point of view. So But there are lots of, if in terms of the environment around here, it's kind of like Narnia, really, in terms of you've got the hills, lots of trails, and they grade all the trails a bit like skiing slopes as well. So in terms of
Wow.
the ease of it, so it makes it easy for you to think, how technical is it? If it's a black trail or a blue trail, etc. So you can kind of do a recce on your mountain bike or go out running to check it first. But there's so many different options, really. And they're really well signposted as well, all the different trails and the maps. So you can do point to point, but also you can do big circuits as well in and around. And you can park up, for example, and go across into the border between France and Spain. So you can kind of do a big circuit, and it just depends on your experience or how, if you want to do a bit of climbing in between that as well. So there's good opportunities there. There's lots of cycling, like the Trans-Pyrenean race. You've got the raid for the ultra trail. There's all sorts, really. Yeah,
Well,
lots.
you've sold it to me. I'm not too sure about those grading of the trails because I went to Slovenia and they say something like this hike takes 2 hours. And well, it didn't take me 2 hours. It took me a lot
Was
longer.
it shorter? Oh, right.
Longer. So maybe, you have to think about your social psycho interpretation of the actual ease of the trail in that respect,
Yeah.
so that you know what you're letting yourself in for on these things. Well, thanks ever so much for coming on the podcast and sharing with me the research you've done, which is really insightful because I don't know anything about this. And I really look forward to the guests that you're going to be having on the podcast as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I look forward to working with you as well.